Welcome back to Kaylee Daily. Today's question is, do I need to do kegels during pregnancy? And we have a very special guest answering that question for us, so stay tuned for more.
This is Kaylee Daily, the bi-weekly podcast about all things doula tips and tips, where we answer one question about pregnancy, labor, postpartum, or lactation in order to have your journey in this parenting world be just a little bit more informed and filled with consent.
Welcome back to Kaylee Daily. We are joined today with a lovely PT that I adore, Katie Beyer. Katie and I met a number of years ago when I was a brand new doula. And I don't know, Katie, do you remember this when we met? So I have to tell a very short.
I'm not sure I do. Remind me.
So we met at like a doula night where we were networking, and you were the first person that ever introduced me to the idea of scar mobilization for C-section.
Yes. Okay. I do remember that.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I was like, teach me. And you're like, do you want me to show you right now? I'm like, where do you want me to lay down?
Where can we go?
At a restaurant. I'm like, sure, yes,
that's
absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, so that is how Katie and I met, and I have since done some PT with her myself and had loads of clients go to her, and she is a wealth of knowledge. So Katie, I would like for you to introduce yourself and kind of how did you get into PT, pelvic floor PT, and then we'll dive into the question. So.
Okay, I'll try to keep it brief, but I have twins who are 11 and they were C-section babies and they were a little early. And then I have a single who was a VBAC, which is vaginal birth after C-section. And after my C-section with my twins, nothing was offered to me, which at the time I didn't even really, honestly, even being a physical therapist, just more of a general PT, I probably should have known more than the average person. I had a somewhat challenging recovery pain, my C-section scar, never told to touch it. And then I started kind of doing more research on postpartum and what should be out there. And, I'm supposed to be doing something with this scar and, just really feeling very alone physically and how to return to things. And again, I had a leg up. I was already a physical therapist and I should have known more. So that kind of stirred me into the whole postpartum world, and then eventually getting into the pelvic floor more specifically as well. And then after I had my vaginal birth, really got to experience kind of that whole delivery and how different it was.
Yep.
And it just gave me such an appreciation for how little people are given as far as information on what to expect. People come to me with postpartum issues and are like, why didn't somebody just tell me? Why didn't just the knowledge alone? We're expected to birth humans through an area we know absolutely nothing about, and then just deal with whatever happens there on our own. So I got very passionate about the recovery process, and that led me into more of well, how can we prevent this? And that got me into more of a lot of the birth prep stuff that I love doing with my pregnant patients now.
Yeah, that's awesome. I feel like even as a doula, my understanding of the pelvic floor has grown so much in the last number of years and gotten to the point where I'm like, we don't know, we have a terrible brain body connection with this whole area. We're just you do what I want you to do, and otherwise I'm just gonna act like you don't exist.
Yeah, and that's what I talk to my patients about, is just connecting to your pelvic floor. It's an area where I think innately from the very beginning it's kind of an area of shame, an area that it's dirty, we don't touch it, we don't talk about it, especially in our culture, just in certain areas it's just seen as this area that we just don't talk about. It's hush hush. And also it's internal. It's an area that we don't look at. So, unless you're making an active effort, which many people are like, please no, we just don't know anything about it. And then again, we're expected to do this very major physical thing through it. And I think just the knowledge of what the pelvic floor is and what we're supposed to be doing with it in pregnancy and postpartum is so just, knowledge is power. And I think, people going into delivery with that knowledge has such a leg up on, on people who just haven't been, educated about it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think one of the things that kind of started me down the path of thinking about pregnancy PT, like pelvic floor PT during pregnancy and not just after delivery, was the idea that kegels is so regularly recommended, just blanket, right? Randomly you read a blog of do kegels before birth in preparation for pushing, as if you're pelvic floor pushes, right? And so
Yeah.
I sort of was like, well, no. But then also after doing plenty of my own like research and training on like balancing and spinning babies and baby positioning and all of that, I'm like, actually, the chance of you having a rock hard pelvic floor is very high, you know? And so maybe Kegels is the opposite of what you want. So today's question is, do I need to do Kegels in pregnancy? And I brought Katie here to answer that for us, which of course, as my questions go, is a question that will have follow-up questions.
Yeah, and it's a very kind of a loaded question, as it
Yeah.
should be. It should not be simple. So I hate when
Yes.
it's just a simple, like Kegels
Yeah.
are the answer. So I tend to get very fired up about I actually stopped using the word Kegel for a while just because I was like, we're gonna call it activations. I just feel like there's this
Yes.
connotation when you think about Kegels. And I've returned back to the word. I think the word is fine, but I think so much it's as if there's like a cure-all for everything. And just like you
Yeah.
said, with delivery, your pelvic floor does not birth your child. Your uterus does, your abdominals will help, but your uterus births the child.
Yeah.
Your pelvic floor is something that just has to part waters, it has to get out of the way.
Yeah.
And so we don't want a rock hard pelvic floor at all. But like, I think we need to think about balance. That word, you use the word balance too with spinning babies, which I also love and do with my pregnant patients, because I think it's again about making the body be able to balance between being strong, but also having length and the ability to lengthen. So anything, any muscle in our body, we don't want it to be too tight. We don't want it to be too loose either. But very rarely do I see a pelvic floor that's just loosey-goosey and not doing anything, and all we're doing is Kegels. We need to have a balance. So my kind of short answer to that question is yes, but because we need strength in pregnancy for sure. You want to have a pelvic floor that's working for you. You want to be stable. You want to be supported. But more often than not, I have women coming to me in pregnancy and in all facets of their life and time of their life with a pelvic floor that has too much tone. We're working on lengthening and we're working on opening long before we're getting to Kegels. And so yes, Kegels are important, strength is important, but the vast majority of what I'm doing with my patients who are pregnant is connecting to the pelvic floor, like I mentioned before, just learning, because most people are doing, even if they think they're doing Kegels, they're doing them wrong. They're squeezing their butt, they're squeezing, their inner thighs, they're holding their breath. So introducing the connection between breath and our diaphragm to the pelvic floor, because some people just have a hard time. They're like, I don't know, am I doing anything in my pelvic floor? Where's my pelvic floor? So I just tell them, when in doubt, our diaphragm and pelvic floor are related. So when the pelvic floor, or when the diaphragm lengthens, as does the pelvic floor. So when in doubt, always return to your breath, always return to your diaphragm, because at least we can feel that. We can wrap our hands around our rib cage and really feel that movement. And then working on both the Kegeling, so feeling what that feels like. And honestly, more often than not, I'm doing that to make sure that they have any kind of strength. I want to know what their strength looks like, but also to feel the difference. So if I'm doing a Kegel and I can feel what that feels like, then let go and feel what that feels like. That's what you're going to want to access when you're delivering the baby. So what it feels like to have that release as you inhale, because that's when that muscle releases and lengthens naturally. We're using that breath and that connection to open. So that's really important in delivery, but also thinking about, even just ahead of, getting into the delivery room, we want to work on that, because you want, again, kind of like a stretching routine, you want to prep the muscle a little bit to be able to lengthen. And I find that the more somebody connects to their pelvic floor in pregnancy, the easier it is for them to tap into it, even just, subconsciously, not even aware, because when you're in the, delivery room, you're not exactly super attuned and focused into your body. It's painful and you're kind of in the middle of it. So just having that kind of prep ahead of time allows your body to naturally be able to go, having some reminders for breath, which is why I love doulas, because there's somebody in the room who is not intimately connected and can give them that sounding board and those reminders to connect where they need to connect. So we need balance in our body. I think about pregnant women is just, I try to make their bodies as efficient as possible. So the lengthening, the activation, we want to have both.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and I think one of the things I go into with clients, which I would love your feedback on this,
Yeah.
is relaxing, like taking some time to learn to relax and lengthen your pelvic floor. And I
Hmm.
do recommend pelvic floor PT, but not everyone follows that recommendation in
No.
pregnancy.
Yeah.
But lengthening on like a birth ball or like a surface where you can feel some feedback when you do
Hmm.
that, because
Yeah.
I think we again are kind of just suck at connecting with
Yeah.
that part of the body. But also the idea of relaxing, like when we sit on the toilet, we take for granted that our pelvic floor relaxes there. You know what I mean?
Well,
Like
it
we don't
should. A
intentionally,
lot of
right?
people have a
Yes,
hard time with that
exactly.
too. But
Yes,
yes, you're right. If you're not having issues with constipation, then yes, that is something that happens. And we don't think about it, like you said, especially like when we're kids, before all this like life and injuries kind of stack up on top of us, which lead to
okay,
pelvic floor stuff.
right,
All that stuff kind of just happens,
yeah,
and then we kind of screw up our bodies.
yeah,
But yeah, I love the idea of sitting on a ball or a little towel roll. You can sit on
yeah,
something underneath kind of your perineum or underneath, kind
uh-huh,
of just under where you're sitting and
mm-hmm,
feeling it lengthening into that. And then
mm-hmm,
once you have that connection, I love having them take it into different positions. So where do you think you want to be
mm-hmm,
delivering? If you're
yeah,
getting an epidural, you do not have to be on your back. As you know, you can be in,
yes,
multiple positions. If
mm-hmm,
you have a position that feels like you can connect to your pelvic floor best or feels good to your body, I tell people, well, that's a great idea to start. Start
mm-hmm,
there. Who knows, when you're
yeah,
in the delivery room, everything can completely go crazy. So who knows? But it's good to have
yeah,
information of how your body responds,
right,
with that connection to your pelvic floor when you're standing. If you don't plan to have epidural, what positions feel good to you? Moving
yeah,
around as much as you can, and prepping and practicing that when they're pregnant.
yeah,
To get that feedback and that connection in different positions.
yeah, yeah. So, I have an unrelated, well, kind of related follow-up question, I
Hmm.
suppose. One of the things that I sometimes think about when I'm sending folks or referring folks for PT in pregnancy is that there's a benefit in seeing the same person pre and post natally. Would you say that's the case, or does it really make a difference?
And I think that helps in everything, whether it's
Yeah,
your mental therapist or whether,
right.
whoever it is, you have a connection. And especially with
Hmm.
something like pelvic floor, which
Hmm.
is intimate. I do internal work, vaginal work
Yeah.
on pregnant and during pregnancy and postpartum, as long
Hmm.
as it's, appropriate with the patient, and as long as they consent. So, it's a very intimate thing. And I
Hmm.
think to have that relationship benefits the recovery and
Yeah.
just the connection you have during your treatments. That being said, if it happens that you have to change and go to another PT, I don't think you're at like a huge disadvantage.
Okay.
Getting PT anywhere is worth it as
Yeah.
long as you feel like they're, giving you good care.
Yeah.
But I certainly, and I just love seeing, what's happened,
Yes.
over the course of their pregnancy, hearing their birth story,
Yeah.
having them, knowing what their body was doing a little bit beforehand, and then I can kind of
Yeah.
feel what's happened afterwards. And as a PT, I think most PTs would say, yes, it's awesome to see that whole progression, from being
Right.
pregnant into being a new parent. But ultimately get PT,
Right.
period, whether or not it's with the right person or with the same person.
Okay. Yeah, that
Yeah,
makes sense.
that's a good question.
So I know you primarily work local to DC, well, to the Virginia area. Do you
Yes.
have any virtual offerings at the moment? I should have asked you this before.
So yeah, no, I do virtual,
Okay.
for sure. And I think it actually works really well for somebody who just wants to kind of discuss and talk about the birth, what happens in birth. I do a
Yep.
lot of discussions about breath work and again,
Hmm.
positions. We talk a lot about how to, take advantage of the way our body moves, our hips and our back and different things like
Yeah.
that to, help during various stages of labor. So I think it does work well. I love getting my hands on people, but that's not
Yeah.
always an option.
Hmm.
And it's not, people may not have the time or whatever.
Yeah.
We understand not everybody can do it. So
Hmm.
virtual, especially for birth prep, I think can really work well. And even for postpartum, especially the early postpartum, kind of
Hmm.
just like, oh my gosh, I just gave birth to a baby. And is
Hmm.
this normal? What's going on? What should I be
Yeah.
doing? Um, so people also don't have to wait for that like magic 6-week checkup to get
Yeah.
in virtual or personal. So
Okay.
we can start with PT. It does not have to be internal. If you have any kind of tearing or you had a C-section, we wouldn't be doing any direct work there, but we certainly can work on many, many other things that can help with your recovery. And I think some people feel like they have to wait, for some magic window. And virtually that certainly doesn't have to happen. And even in person, it doesn't.
Okay. Now, a follow-up question to that is, are you able to see people all over the country, or how does PT work in terms of licensing?
It is, so there's gray area in there, but no, if it's specific PT.
Okay.
If I was truly doing simple birth prep, which is something that many different, doulas do, and, other people do, I would say I would feel comfortable, doing, seeing somebody from somewhere else. If we were getting nitty gritty pelvic floor, there's gray area in there, but technically no, as a PT, no, I can't. Okay. It's just Virginia. Yep.
Yeah. As I was asking you, I was like, wait a second, licensing is different for physical therapy.
Yeah, but there's different avenues that we're diving into. So you can with certain areas.
That's one of my frustrations with pelvic floor PT is like here in DC, we have many options and still I think we need more, right? Like we still don't have enough.
Nope.
But there are whole areas of the country that have like nobody,
I know people who are like the lone PT and they're like basically not even just their town, but like surrounding area. And it's, I can't imagine. I mean, of course people aren't seeking care because even if they tried, they couldn't get in.
Right, they don't have access.
Yeah. No, there needs to be more of us. I say that all the time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate you taking time to talk to us today. I will make sure all of your contact info is in the show notes so people can get in touch with you. Katie has some amazing reels, very informative info on her Instagram. So I will
They're fun.
That.
Well, I really appreciate this. This was so fun. I could talk about this stuff all day. So this is great. And I appreciate
I'll have to bring you back for postpartum something.
Yeah, anytime. I'd love it.
All right. Well, enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, you too.
We will see everyone at the next episode.
Edited and produced by Kaylee Harrod, as I'm sure you can probably tell. And our amazing music is credited in the show notes as well. So we look forward to seeing you on the next episode. And in the meantime, have wonderful and consent-filled births.